Hi, and welcome to another edition of Jules Voto's Photo Focus. This is a video I talked about doing at the end of a video I did, I guess it was back in May or June, called Using a Digital Camera Like a Manual Focus Film Camera. And in that video, I was shooting the Italian Market Festival in Philadelphia using Minolta's 28mm 3.5 vintage manual focus lens. That lens dated from the mid to late 60s. So in this video, I just want to expand on that a little, on using manual focus lenses on a digital camera. And I've done several videos on this going back several years. On this video, I want to talk about a few of my favorite vintage manual focus wide angle lenses, which I use on my mirrorless cameras. And I have used many different brands of vintage lenses on my mirrorless cameras. And that's one of my favorite things about the mirrorless cameras, is that it's so easy to adapt lenses. I have used lenses from Canon, Minolta, Pentax, Nikon, Olympus, several others that I can't think of off the top of my head. So in this video, we're going to be looking at the wide angles. And when I first got interested in photography, my very first camera was a Pentax H1A, and it came with a 55mm lens. And the second lens I bought was a 35mm preset, I think it was a Vivitar lens. It was not the greatest lens, but after shooting with that 55 for a while, it was nice to have a different focal length. And then later on, when I got into Nikon, the second lens I bought for my Nichromat FTN was Nikon's 35mm 2.8. And since that time, I've almost always owned a 35mm lens. In fact, when I was working for a newspaper, I had two wide angles. I had the 35 f2. By that time, I bought the 35 f2, and I also had the 24 2.8. But let's talk about the lens in this video, and that is the Pentax Super Takumar 35mm 3.5. Now, I've done a video on this lens previously, and I'll put a link in the description below to this lens. But one of the best things about this lens, as you can see, is its size. It weighs, let me just check, 5.4 ounces. It's tiny. And of course, using it on the digital camera, on the mirrorless camera, you need an adapter. And I use these Photasi adapters. They're inexpensive. I've had no issues with them. They're all metal. But when you screw this lens, and this is an M42 screw mount lens. It was originally designed for Pentax screw mount M42 mount cameras, such as the H1A or the Spotmatic and others. But you could see how much bigger this is with the adapter. So, if you're using this on a film camera, on a Pentax film camera or Yashica film camera or other screw mount film cameras, it's, much more compact. But it's all metal construction, metal focus ring, very smooth. It has apertures from 3.5 to f16 with half click stops. It's just a great little lens. It's sharp. It takes 49mm filters. Now, I don't have a shade for this lens, but I didn't have any issues using this without a shade. So I'm very pleased with this one. Okay, so this is just a great little lens in great shape. You pick these up really cheap. I think I paid $40 for this one, maybe 3 years ago. Okay, so that is the 35. And that's one of my favorite focal lengths for a prime lens. Next is a 28mm lens, and this is the Minolta MC Rocore SG 28mm 3.5. Now, I recently did a video using this lens. Actually, I think I did a couple of videos on this lens. I will put links in the description below to them. This is again, all metal construction, dates from mid to late 60s, I believe. It takes 55 millimeter filters. You know, it's a little bigger, a little heavier. It weighs 8.6 ounces. So like a little over 3 ounces more. Focuses down to 2 feet. And I didn't tell you how close the Pentax focus is, but Pentax focuses down to 1.5 feet. So this Minolta focuses down to 2 feet. So I used this lens at the photographs I took at the Italian Market Festival, and like I said, I'll put a link to this in the description below to that. But I had it focused to approximately 7 feet, and at 7 feet at f11, you have adequate sharpness from about 4 feet to infinity. So both of these lenses, both of these wide-angle lenses, in fact, manual focus wide-angle lenses are so convenient to use for street photography, better, in my opinion, than autofocus lenses on a mirrorless camera, because you just set your aperture, you set your focus to give you a wide depth of field, okay? And like I said, in this case, it's set to 7 feet, and that gives me approximately 4 feet to infinity. So all I have to do is raise the camera and shoot. And it makes it just so easy. Again, I used auto exposure and just raise the camera and shoot. And this is a nice sharp little lens. I don't have it in front of me, but I do have the original Minolta shade for this lens. Minolta lenses, like Pentax lenses, like Nikon lenses, like most of the lenses from the 60s, are just very well made. They hold up really well. You could pick these up really cheap. I don't remember what I paid for this one, but it wasn't that much, maybe 30, again, around the same price as that Pentax, I think, in the $30 to $40 range. So very pleased with this lens. And the last lens I'm going to talk about, oh, one other thing, I'm sorry. The adapter for that is also a Photassi adapter. Again, these adapters are very cheap, under $20. And you just match the red dots up, I think. There we go. And again, that adds to the length of the lens, but the Minolta lens is bigger than the adapter, unlike the Pentax lens that was smaller than the adapter. And finally, I'm going to talk about one of my favorite focal lengths, especially back in the day when I was working for the newspaper. As I said, I had a 35 2.0, and I also had a 24 2.8. And this is Nikon's very nice 24 millimeter AIS lens. It dates from the early 80s. I'm not sure, 81, 82, around there. It's multi-coated. It's the only one of these 3 lenses that is multi-coated. I've spoken about this lens before as being one of my favorite manual focus lenses a while back in a video. This has 9 elements and 9 groups. It's the heaviest of the 3. It weighs 9 ounces, focuses down to 1 foot. And of course, with this lens, you're going to get even more depth of field. Stop down. So let's here go set it to f8. And at f8, everything from approximately, well, infinity to about 4 feet is in focus. So it gives you extreme depth of field, great for that point and shoot type photography, great on, and you could, on any mirrorless camera. I mean, you could adapt this lens to the Sonys, to the Canons, Olympus, any mirrorless camera, just about any mirrorless camera, as far as I know, you can mount this lens to with the proper adapter. And like I said, you could get these adapters very cheap. And these adapters, just for those of you who are unfamiliar with them, basically all they are is a tube. Okay, it's just a hollow tube that positions the lens at the proper distance from the focal plane, so you can focus the entire range to infinity, okay? No optics at all, so it does not degrade image quality. Now with this Nikon 24, which is an F-mount AIS lens, I use the F to Z adapter. This is the original one. There's a newer one that's a little more compact. It doesn't have this tripod socket in the bottom, on the bottom. And again, adding the adapter of course, adds to the size. And this adapter also will work with Nikon autofocus lenses that have built-in motors. It will not work with the screw drive Nikon lenses. It'll work. You can manually focus them, but you won't be able to autofocus the screw drive lenses with this. This 24 2.8 is also the most expensive of these lenses. Of course, it's also the most modern. This lens, like I said, dates from the early 80s, where these others from the 60s. And there's something to be said for these vintage lenses. They are not as sharp as today's lenses, in my opinion. You really don't see that until you really start to go big, but they just give, most of them at least, a different look. And multi-coating came in the early 70s. Pentax was really the first to make a big deal out of it. And then there were additional coatings added later on, and lenses today are great. You know, you can shoot just about into the sun with very little flare. These lenses, not so much. So you got to be careful when shooting into the sun, but you may like that look. And overall, they just give a softer, I don't know the best word for it, I'll say vintage look. You know, some of my favorite photographs were taken in the 40s and 50s and into the 60s. And some of these lenses, the non-multi-coated ones, kind of give that look. And it's really nice. And the ability to adapt all these different lenses, you could really experiment, and you don't have to spend a lot of money. You know, that's a great thing. Today's lenses are fantastic. The Z-mount lenses for Nikon, the R-mount for Canon, and I know the Sony lenses are all excellent. Quick autofocus, well made, but there's something about these old ones. One, these old ones are much smaller. These vintage lenses are so much smaller. They're all metal, where a lot of today's lenses are plastic. Not that I think that's a big issue, but you could afford to buy a bunch of them for the price of one of these high-end mirrorless lenses. So, you know, when you could grab a lens for $15, $20, $30, why not? And the adapters are cheap. So it's one of my favorite things to do, is just to experiment with all these different lenses. And you buy them cheap, you try them out. If you don't like it, you don't like the look with that lens, put it right back up on sale and you'll get about what you paid for it. So there's really, you're not losing any money. And I noticed the prices are gradually going up on these lenses because so many people are shooting mirrorless cameras and they know they can do this, that they could use these vintage lenses. So that has driven the price up a little bit. Now, in my next video, I'm going to talk about some of my favorite normal lenses. And I'm going to try to keep it to 3 lenses in each of these videos. And then what I may be doing down the road. A while back, I did a series of videos, and I think it was only like 3 or 4, called Vintage Lens Modern Camera, where I talked about one lens showed a lot of images. So I may be getting back into that because a lot of people ask me about these old lenses. So the next one will be on normal lenses. The one after that will be on telephoto lenses, some of my favorite telephoto lenses. So I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear what lenses you use, what adapters you use, your opinion of these old manual focus, these vintage manual focus lenses. And you know, you could also adapt autofocus lenses from other manufacturers to different mirrorless camera. It's a great time, as I've said this many times before, it's a great time to be a photographer. We just have so many options. You could go high-end, spend a lot of money on lenses, or you could pick up some of these manual focus lenses for a very low price. So leave your comments or questions in the comments below. I always try to respond to all questions and comments. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I publish a new video every Monday morning and Wednesday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. So I'll talk to you next time.